Welcome to Transform Now, the podcast brought to you by robotic process automation pioneer SS&C Blue Prism. Digital transformation has the potential to reshape the way companies service their customers, engage their employees, and manage their operations. Whether you're looking to develop strategies, tactics, or best practices to positively impact the future of work, or you're curious to see how other companies have successfully navigated their digital transformation programs, then this podcast is for you. We're here to help you transform now.
Hello, everyone. I'm Brad Hairston with SS&C Blue Prism. Welcome to the Transform Now podcast. Today, I'm thrilled to have two guests on the show. The first is Paula Cox, SVP of Business Development and Partner Marketing at WonderBotz, a Blue Prism delivery partner. And my second guest is Gregg Brett, Global GM of Process Intelligence at SS&C Blue Prism. I will be talking with Paula and Greg about how process and task mining is revolutionizing the way intelligent automation is done in the modern era. Welcome, Paula and Greg. Let's start with some intros. Paula, why don't you go first?
Sure. Thanks so much for having me, Brad. It's always a pleasure talking with you and looking forward to this conversation with Greg. As you mentioned, I do lead a group at WonderBotz Business Development, and we've been a proud partner of SS&C Blue Prism. Before the acquisition, we go way back. I'm looking forward to this conversation, especially as our clients are branching into process task mining, and really executives are trying to get a handle on what kind of work is actually being performed within their organizations. And I think we've got a good group to begin a great conversation and get people thinking about how they're going to add this to their next tech stack.
Great. Thank you. Greg, how about you?
Hi, Brad. Great to be here. Great to be here with Paula. Gregg Brett. I'm the Global GM for Process Intelligence at SS&C Blue Prism. I've been at Blue Prism and now SS&C for 3.5 years. And I ran alliances and partners initially, and then the Americas for a period of time. And about 8 months ago, I was given the opportunity to take on the Process Intelligence remit, and it's been an incredible journey. We have a lot of exciting things to share with you, Brad and Paula. So looking forward to this discussion.
Well, it's great to have both of you on today talking about process mining. This is absolutely one of the hottest topics in the automation realm these days. Certainly, ChatGPT comes up maybe a little bit more often, about every 3 seconds, but not a day goes by that I don't hear process mining mentioned as well. So, Greg, it's been about 1.5 years since Blue Prism launched its process intelligence capability, which is called Blue Prism Process Intelligence, or BPPI. And I did a podcast focused on it back at that time. How have things progressed since then? Can you bring us up to date?
Yeah, a lot of interesting things. First, I just wanted to talk about the market size and the market opportunity in general. Most analysts believe this is going to be about a $4.5 to $5 billion marketplace by 2024, 2025 at the latest. If you read some of the latest Gartner information around this space, they believe that by 2025, 80% of large enterprises are going to have process and task mining or some kind of process intelligence deployed across multiple units. So the market is huge and growing. Most analysts also say there's a 50 to 60% CAGR on the growth of the process intelligence space. So from every perspective, it's an enormous marketplace. The growth is going to be huge. In the last 8 months, we've had about a 400% increase in the pipeline in BPPI. We have 400 total opportunities that we're pursuing at different levels of the sales cycle. And of those 400, there are 80 opportunities that I would call highly active. And those fall into 3 categories. We've either performed a proof of concept or what we call a guided evaluation. We're in the midst of one, or we're about to deploy one within the next month or so. And so we're seeing activity across multiple verticals: banking, financial services, insurance, manufacturing, retail, and government and utilities. All of those areas are active and hot for BPPI and process intelligence.
That's fantastic. And Paula, as an automation consultancy, how does process mining factor into the work that WonderBotz is doing?
Thanks so much for that question. At WonderBotz, Brad, we definitely make sure to be part of every single component and facet of the intelligent automation space. And it's imperative that we understand technology before our clients are asking the questions about what they're supposed to do next and how they're supposed to scale. And what we found with process mining and task mining over the years is that it's actually gotten a flavor of that chat GPT, of that AI buzz to it. And now, coupled with some of the other tools that we're seeing on the scene, you're able to do so much more than just what you were traditionally able to do with log dependency. So, what used to happen is that process mining was sold as the best way to find your next automation. And that's true, but there's several ands. It's the best way to find your next automation. It's also the best way to find out what your employees are doing. In this remote work hybrid space that we've morphed into, it's also important to see that SLAs are being completed. Where are there opportunities for training? How can we make work better? And so we're really seeing our clients pick up task and process mining, not just to find the automation opportunities that are behind the scenes, but really understanding their work as a whole. And as an intelligent automation firm, and as you put it, as a consultancy, WonderBotz aims to improve the way work is performed. And we power outcomes by using different technologies. And this is one of the ones that has a really great chance of having a lot of outcomes and ultimately a great ROI.
Greg, I know that you interact with a lot of our customers who are starting to add process mining to their automation program. What kind of changes have you noticed in these programs as a result?
If you think about it, Brad, the low hanging automation fruit has typically been addressed. I mean, most companies, certainly large and medium sized companies, many of them have already automated what is quote unquote low hanging fruit. And so now COEs in particular are looking for, rather than going to business units and saying, tell me where your next automation is going to come from, they'd much rather go to the business unit and say, we have tools, we have capabilities to tell you where you should automate next. And it doesn't have to be the low hanging fruit. And so there's a ton of enthusiasm within COEs and certainly beyond the COEs, because I think at every level of businesses these days, they realize that that low hanging automation fruit has already been addressed. And now it's the more difficult areas of where deep within our processes, deep within our sub processes, deep within our task flows, and even subtask flows are those next automations. And then more importantly, it's not just about discovering those next automations. It's about discovering the highest ROI automation. So you know how not only which automations to put in your pipeline, but how to prioritize those in the pipeline. That's what process and task mining does. It not only discovers the next set of automations, but it tells you what ROI you can get from those automations. And inside of BPI, there are tools that allow you to do all manner of what if analysis, both from a time and a cost and a process and task flow perspective. So instead of going blind into an automation you think or believe will be a high value automation, you know it's going to be a high value automation.
And Greg, I know a lot of programs have suffered what we sometimes call an automation stalemate. They've kind of lost their mojo around automation. What kind of difference has process mining made in those companies in terms of sparking new enthusiasm or maybe even improving management visibility around automation?
Absolutely. But I do think it's important to understand that process mining and process intelligence, as well as task mining, is more nascent than automation, obviously.
Hmm.
Automation has been around for 10 plus years, certainly even longer than that. Process intelligence is relatively new. So there is an educational curve that some of the clients are going through. Everyone's talking about it, both the COEs and the business units. But I think one of the things we've been doing a lot of in the last certainly 8 months is educating not just COEs, but businesses as well as to what are the benefits of process and task mining. How do you use those to then get you towards those next automations, et cetera, et cetera. So there's tons of enthusiasm. Almost every company you talk to knows, is thinking about, has seen, or is looking at process intelligence. It's just a question of where are they in that learning curve?
Hmm.
And that's one of the things we've been doing heavily over the last 8 months is educating customers, but not educating them just notionally. We've been actually doing many proof of concepts, what we call guided evaluations. Think of them as custom demos. And honestly, we've probably done 60 or 70 of those over the last 8 months. So we're not only telling customers about process intelligence, we're showing them their data in process intelligence, and they are finding value in those.
Mm. Paula, I know you have a background in process improvement before you got into automation. Why do you think automation teams are leaning into process mining, sometimes even before their process improvement teams are doing so?
That's a great question, Brad. And it's funny because you're right. Before I was slinging robots and playing in this intelligent automation space, I was a Lean Six Sigma and really, really honed into the art of process mining. And back in the day, it was more about asking a lot of questions, polling the various business units that touched similar systems, understanding where the training of one department, maybe finance and accounting, the way that they did processes had a downstream impact on the way that HR hired, and really process improvement as a function was the division kind of bringing things back together. And so you'd have multiple business units that would all have to collaborate and contribute into how the as is process was to really get that understanding. With it starting in intelligent automation, just like how automation begins to connect systems, people, and processes, I believe that process mining will ultimately get there. As Greg said, it's a little bit more nascent in understanding it at an enterprise scale. But just like automation has its true benefit when you do an end to end process, business unit to business unit, system to system, that's going to be the case once process mining has its turn, right? And so it's been really important to us. And at WonderBotz, we take a holistic approach to the organization. If we're building an automation for one business unit, like I said, and it has implications or it has a downstream or perhaps upstream impact that we have to chase the process to its origin, to its system origin, we make sure to communicate that message because every stakeholder that's going to be affected and either a beneficiary and or their work is going to change as a result of the new way of the new automated reality must know that's coming, right? There needs to be
Mhm.
communication and change understood there. And so when it comes to the COEs, because they're already intimately working with processes, I think it was just a natural stepping stone to say the governance around this is similar. We can have it centralized and then federate some of the outcomes. So it's really approaching that life cycle, that sales delivery life cycle of automation. So I think it's just a comfort in the way that it's being moved. But what we're seeing is the folks that want to have conversations about BPPI and then our additional tool that sort of adds a layer of AI to it, those are the executives actually. And this is becoming a top down initiative to really understand what the organization is doing and how work's being performed.
Paula, I think in most companies, what you see is the Lean Six Sigma people are over on one side, and then the automation team is on the other, and never the two shall mix. What kind of role could process mining play in bringing those two together?
I think it's ultimately going to be the great connector. Once processes are identified factually and not just by a series of questions and answers that could be skewed by bias or old ways of thinking, then facts can't lie, right? And so when we're all looking at what the actuals are, I think that's going to be a new world where process mining, the process improvement folks of the world, the Lean Six Sigma folks of the world will use their backgrounds but also marry that with technology, and I think that's the modern push forward for that area.
Mm, Right. Greg, quantification. That is definitely one of the biggest pain points for automation teams, really understanding not only how much it costs to do a process in today's environment, but what is that going to look like when you automate? What kind of benefits are you going to get? What is the role that process mining is playing in that?
Most companies don't really know, other than theoretically or through opinion or through other biased means, how their processes run today and the cost of those processes and the effects of those processes. What process intelligence does is it creates what we call in the industry a digital twin of your process, but it's a digital twin based on data, not based upon what you assume is happening. I can't tell you how many times, Brad, that we have talked to customers and analyzed their processes. They think it's a 25-step process. It's a 70-step process. They think it takes 7 days. They have outliers that take 21 or 22 or 23 days. That happens consistently. So number one, you have to be able to accurately determine what are the time frames and the costs of the as is process. Then process intelligence allows you to input into that. What if we automated these 3 steps in the process? What if we avoided these 5 steps in the process? And there are a couple tools, for instance, in our solution that allow you to do that really easily. One is called the Primary Path Analytic Tool. That tool actually pulls out for you the path that sometimes is known as the happy path, the most efficient running of a particular process. And it tells you why that process is run efficiently when done that way. It also tells you why the other ways of running that process are inefficient. And then we have a second tool called a predictive analytics simulation tool, which allows you to do all manner of what if analysis. What if we sped up this process by 2 times? What if we could reduce these 5 steps in the process? What would happen risk and compliance wise or governance wise if these steps weren't performed? And it tells you that from a cost perspective, a time perspective, and a running of the process perspective. So process intelligence really, it gives you the baseline and gives you the baseline based on real data, not assumptions. And then it allows you to do all kinds of scenario analysis around what happens if I automate this? What happens if we remove these steps? What if we redesign the process these 4 ways? And now that BPPI is integrated not just with Blue Prism RPA, but now SS&C Blue Prism BPM, we can actually back and forth communicate to RPA and BPM now.
Paula, Greg mentioned governance. Could you talk about that topic? What impact is process mining making in that area?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think as with any introduction of a new tool, new technology, and a new way of performing work, we have to think about this. I think it's been a while since I've heard the term digital workforce, digital worker. We got to remember that's what it is. So just like any other employee cohort, right, there has to be some governance around what type of information, what type of actionability the output of information requires, and what sort of benchmarks or thresholds we're going to act upon versus leave things as is, right? And so when it comes to us advising the implementation of some of these tools into the environment, that's one of the first things that you have to understand is the operating model in which this is going to work so that you have really kind of checks and balances on things. I'll give you a very practical example. A lot of people are clamoring at the chance to get their sustainability data under control, exposed, understood, so that they can meet reporting standards. Process mining has been a great way to take a peek at where that emissions data is going, where some of this information is, so that you can then parcel it out and therefore report it. So even though the source data is something that's going to be pulling from everything, the outcome and what pieces different business units and different leaders are supposed to see, allowed to see, and governing over vary. And the system has to be set up to be able to monitor that visibility and that actionability. So while somebody might have access to the initial source system, they might not have access to the system of record. Process mining has to factor that in when it's exposing the truth of how things are being done at an organization. And an analyst or an expert in this space, that's why it's so important to have data scientists and or partners, depending on the complexity of how you're going about these implementations, explain, help, and guide you to a place of governance. The last thing you want is exposed data and to be doing the inversion of what you're trying to do, which is find more efficiencies, find more opportunities for saving and improvement by truncating the system or having early naysayers as a result of having a silly little governance blunder. And so it's really, really important that the transmission of data, the storage of data, and then, like I said, who gets the output for the actionability of that data is clearly defined and within the guidelines of the corporate standards. So that's a really important part of the upfront implementation, sort of that phase 2 of what Greg described. Once those pilots are done and that's done in an insular capsule, that's great. Enterprise launch requires a little bit more thought and the culmination of the corporate standards from other business units so that that's done nice and tightly and, again, adheres to the corporate governance standards.
Brad, one thing that I would add to what Paula just said, process intelligence is not just about the discovery of processes and creating those digital twins. In our solution in BPPI, we have a 360-degree monitoring, alerting, and governance protocol capability. So once you've established the baseline, the as is, and created that digital twin, done the analysis for what kinds of things we can do to transform that process, or sub-process, task or subtask. Then you want to actually connect those systems, and we can go all the way up to near real time with BPPI to those systems that run those processes and say, okay, we've made changes to this process. We've automated portions of this process. Is it now performing on an ongoing basis the way we thought it would when we were designing these automations or creating these transformations? And we even have something called a protocol capability, which allows you to set a protocol template that says, this process needs to go through these 25 steps. If these steps aren't adhered to and we miss a step, send an alert, trigger a digital worker, inform a particular unit. It's the entire life cycle that you have to consider with process intelligence. It's understanding what the as is, creating that digital twin, being able to foretell what kind of transformations will do for you cost wise, personnel wise, business benefit wise. And then it's monitoring post those changes and saying, did we achieve what we hoped we achieved? Are we still on target to get where we thought we would be after these transformations?
Yeah, I think that gets lost in the shuffle a lot of times, how much you can use it to measure the results you're getting. And like you said, are we getting the value that we said we were going to get by automating these steps, but also that accountability and making sure you're not skipping steps in the process.
Brad, I was going to just add too, it's compliance down the road, right? Because
hmm
once you have a standard, this is what Lean Six Sigma has been dreaming of, right? Once you have the process established, identified, and done, that continuous monitoring is proving that compliance check mark across the board. And I think internal auditors are going to absolutely love this once it becomes more widespread as well.
Paula, I know that you do a lot of work with CFOs. How does this capability sit with them? Are they coming on board, or is there still a lot of work to do to convince them about the value proposition of process mining?
Yeah, so it's a well put question. I think right now CFOs have a lot on their plate, right? This particular year has seen a lot of activity. You know, the SD Bank, like there's been a lot that CFOs have to keep top of mind. Their cash flow, making sure that things are up to snuff. A labor crunch. There's been a labor shortage in almost every area. And so when these macro factors kind of come down, it's difficult to have a tool, a technology, or a different way of operating become front and center. The good news, though, is what we were able to learn from approaching CFOs during the pandemic is that you have to seize the day because it's never going to be a good time, right? So there's kind of two sides to that. You can always lean on the macro factors, but you can always say, you know what? It's always a good time to optimize because you never know what's going to fall. It's actually been the finance department and with that ESG sort of lens that's really been leaning into, well, how is it that we do it today? And before we put another compliance standard across the board, like lease accounting or another gap requirement, let's understand, let's stop for a second and see what things are really, really doing and how they're being performed today. And so, actually, one of the conversations that I have coming up, and it has to do with process mining, it's actually the CFO brought in the CEO for a Fortune 500 company that I wouldn't have thought would be considering this off the bat. But again, it's not just about finding automation potential, it's about understanding how the work is truly being done in your organization. And there's pieces of this technology that truly gives you what it's called process intelligence. It's important to understand the way things are done because cutting an hour could have a monumental impact on the balance sheet. And I think they understand that. There's just a little bit of fatigue in the office of the CFO about one more implementation and one more thing that I got to pull my people off the line for. And so that's why WonderBotz has partnered so seamlessly with the SS&C Blue Prism tool because we're able to take a little bit of that pressure off of pulling people off the line. We have a little bit of AA componentry that allows for the work to be mapped, not just with what comes out of the system logs, but with what actual work is being performed. And that marries back to the BPPI product beautifully to be able to say, you know what, this isn't going to be as heavy of a lift as you think, and this isn't going to take as much time of your folks off the line to answer questions. And so the trifecta, I think, is when you get somebody from the executive sponsorship side, somebody from finance and accounting, and someone from HR, because then the true understanding of what the human capital adjustment will be once you really get your mind around operating and becoming a modern organization, I think that's really when, the magic begins and the ROI has a tail rather than just project per project. It's a true transformation at that point.
Mm. It makes a ton of sense, Paula. Thank you. Well, Greg, I always love to talk about a real life customer success story just to kind of bring all this to life. Can you share one where a customer needed something to really accelerate their program and process mining was just the medicine they needed?
Yeah, I'd love to talk about one in particular and potentially a few others. But let's start with a company called Unica. They are a large insurance company in the Nordics, in EMEA. They are 22,000 employees, and they represent about 16 to 18 million lives across Europe, and not just Northern Europe, but across Europe in general. They had spent, Brad, about 2 years, and I'm serious about this. They had spent about 24 months using other vendors' process intelligence and task mining tools. Their hope was to do exactly what we talked about earlier in the podcast, which was they had automated all the low hanging fruit. They were looking to find out, how do our processes actually run? And can we find new automations and build an automation pipeline that is actually not just based on assumptions, it's based on the creation of digital twins, understanding how our processes run today, and then running some ROI analyses on what the potential transformations and automations will be. The problem this company had was many of the tools that they were using out there were very technical in nature and weren't focused toward the business users. And so they spent 2 years trying to get a few of these competitors' solutions out there up and running in their institution. It was taking 6 to 8 weeks just to train highly technical folks within Uniqua's business on some of these tools. And when they got the results from the tools, the discovery out of these tools, there wasn't an obvious link between what the tool was saying was the process, what kind of ROI they might get out of it, and how they got to those results, what actually needs to be changed. And they didn't have direct integration between process intelligence, those tools, and automation like we do with BPPI. So in just a couple months, Uniqua were able to achieve a few things with BPPI. Number one, it took 2 days instead of 6 to 8 weeks to train not technical users, business users on BPPI. Number two, it took about 2/3 less time for them to discover processes and actually find automations and determine the ROI of those. So they had a 70% improvement in process discovery and process ROI discovery as well. And remember, they had spent 2 years trying to find automations with other tools with zero results. In 2 months, they found 50 automations that were mission critical, that were not part of their existing automation pipeline with BPPI. And this is a customer now that has done a few testimonials for us and is a very good reference for us. So that's one example. Here's another example. There's a large government agency in France, the third largest. They have a 10-year digital transformation strategy. Again, they did not have a good handle of a pipeline of automations that fed that 10-year digital transformation strategy. In about 2 weeks with BPPI, they found about 25 automations that connected directly to that 10-year digital transformation strategy. And it only took them a few days, just like Unica, in order to learn BPPI and be able to do it. Now, they used a partner similar to WonderBotz over in France to do this, but that shows the importance of having a partner that, and this partner in particular, had been working with this customer for 2 years on their digital transformation strategy. So the partner knew their digital transformation strategy, knew the systems that were underlying those processes they were trying to mine. And then they were able to use that to accelerate their path towards really valuable automations. Like I said, 15 or 20 automations were found almost instantaneously.
Greg, this brings a question to mind. How big of a company do you need to be able to take advantage of process mining? Both the examples you gave are fairly large organizations, but can this play a role in even the smaller size company?
Every company on the planet that has processes, which is basically every company effectively, can benefit from process and task mining and process intelligence. One of the problems that has existed in the marketplace today is, well, there's a few problems. One, the cost of many of the solutions that have been out there have been pretty high. So some of our competitors are expensive, both from a cost of the software perspective and what it takes to get it usable. You have to employ a lot of their professional services folks. You have to employ the big GSIs, for instance, who have high costs often to their services. And so that combination has made it difficult for medium and small, some medium, and certainly small companies to adopt process intelligence. We don't have those same costs, in particular with BPPI. And you just heard a couple examples where business users in a couple days learned how to use our product and were able to deploy it themselves effectively. So that's one thing that's benefiting that situation. The other situation is that the solution only targets highly technical users. That's one of the biggest issues small companies and some small medium companies are going to have is they may not have that kind of IT presence, that capability, the CIO's office, so to speak, that can do the technical side of a highly technical solution. And so if you get a solution and bring it to market that is focused on the business user, many of those small companies will have the ability to have business analysts, normal business operational people that can use process intelligence. And that is indeed, I think, one of the biggest differentiators of BPPI. It is designed for and is used by business users, period, full stop. Everything is drop and drag. Nothing is coded. We don't have our own language. It is 100% designed for the business user. And I think a combination of the pricing that we have, which is much lower cost than some of our competitors, and focus on the business user is going to help smaller companies adopt this.
Awesome. Well, Paula, you get the final word today. So let me ask you to just provide your advice on how customers can get started with process mining.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this has been a great discussion and hopefully it piques curiosity for more questions because there's so much more that we could go on and on about the value here. And I think, as with any technology, when getting started, it's important to not go at it alone, right? At this point, several people have done proof of concepts. I think Greg rattled off 70 to 100 folks that have had this implemented or installed in some way, shape, or form, either in pilot version or in their own data. I encourage in this industry in general, intelligent automation, peer sharing, and really asking questions, even before saying speak to a partner. We've created an intelligent automation user group. It's actually taking place in a few weeks, and I'll be sharing a lot about it. That's bi-monthly because these are the kind of questions that folks want to ask. How do we start in one area with process mining, or do we go wholesale? Do we pick one system to start being more savvy on and then get the proof point and evangelize it like we did with RPA back in the day? Or is this something that we really need to get our teeth in? Does legal need to be involved in this early on, right? Are there things that we realize that we've gotten maybe dinged on or audit dings along the way that maybe would be a better place to start than just the processes that we're already doing? So I think first, it's a lot about networking and socializing. I think this is something to not go at it alone, both on the partner side, on the vendor side, and internally. So that's the first advice that I'd give. And then if you want to get started, I think that the way that Greg's going about offering a little bit of a bundle, a little bit of an understanding, get your feet wet, see the results, I think that's a nice, slow and steady entrance into how you see it working. But more importantly, I think it's about understanding your entire tech stack. And there's still a lot of COE leaders that are adding their digital workforce 1 year at a time, not thinking strategically, not thinking 3 years ahead, not understanding that this is true revolution, right, in how you're going to approach work in the future. And as such, it needs to be taken with a more strategic lens. So if you're planning on dabbling, you're probably not going to get the results that you want, just like any other thing that's just dabble worthy, right? And so my advice is talk to enough people to where you get enough guts, courage, and you have the support from your stakeholders to actually do it. Because you can do a whole bunch of pilots and get in pilot la la land and never really implement or put anything into work. So ask a lot of questions. People have been there, done that. Talk to them first. Get you a good partner that's going to shoot you straight and tell you when to turn back or heed caution. And you got to go all in on these things. It's been proven. It's not about it not working, right? It's about whether you want to change the way that your organization works. And with the advent of everything that's happening that we've seen with tech layoffs, company going under, several acquisitions taking place in the smaller business space, the question is, do you want to still be around? Organization leader, right? Do you still want to exist? So if you want to have that competitive edge, then you got to get with what the big boys are doing. And this has been done a lot longer than what we've been talking about behind the scenes. And it's imperative to either get on board or cease to exist. And that's how these things are working. It's really important to understand how it is that your organization ticks today.
Excellent. Great final word there, Paula. Well, Paula and Greg, it's been a real pleasure talking to you both today. Thank you for being on the podcast. Process mining is such an important topic in the world of intelligent automation. It's truly the missing piece, I think, in many programs. And I hope this will be an inspiration to those companies that they'll really want to explore it. And now it's, as you both have said, it's easier than ever to wade into those waters. So thank you for all of your insights and your stories that you've shared. And I wish you both the very best.
Thanks so much, Brad. Take care, Greg.
Take care, Paula. Thanks.
Thanks for tuning in to Transform Now. For more insightful discussions on digital transformation and more, check out our podcast channel where you'll find all of our previous episodes. And to make sure you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast player. And if you like what you've heard, please leave us a review. For more information about digital transformation and the future of work, check out blueprism.com to learn how SS&C Blue Prism's digital workforce is enabling enterprise transformation now.